Clara Weston dropped to her knees on the frozen platform, her carpet bag falling into the snow. The telegram in her hand, the one promising a new life, a husband, a home, was now just a cruel joke. The man who sent for her was dead, buried 3 days ago. "Please," a small voice said behind her. "Please don't cry, ma'am." Clara turned. A red-haired girl, no more than 8, stood shivering in a coat too thin for the bitter wind. Beside her, a boy of 5 clutched a ragged dog to his chest. "You need a home," the girl said quietly. "And we need a mama. Ours died too." If this story touches your heart, subscribe to our channel and follow Clara's journey to the very end. Drop a comment telling us which city you're watching from. We love seeing how far our tales have traveled. Wyoming Territory. Winter of 1878. The train whistle screamed once and died into the howling wind. Clara Weston stood alone on the platform at Sweetwater Station, clutching a telegram that had just destroyed everything. Regret to inform. Henry Marsh deceased. Fever took him December 2nd. Funeral concluded. Her hands shook, not from cold, from the crushing weight of those words. Henry Marsh, the man she had traveled 2,000 miles to marry. The man whose letters had promised her safety purpose, a second chance at life after losing everything. Dead. She read it again. Then again. The words didn't change. "Ma'am." The station clerk stepped closer, his breath clouding. "You the bride Henry Marsh sent for." Clara nodded. Her voice wouldn't come. "Shame," he said, shaking his head. "Good man Henry was. But Fever don't care about wedding plans." He glanced at her carpet bag, then at the empty road beyond the station. "You got anywhere to go?" "No." "Family back east?" "No." The clerk shifted his weight, uncomfortable. "Well, there ain't no hotel here. Boarding house is full up with railroad men. And this cold—" He didn't finish. He didn't need to. Clara understood. In a town like this, a woman alone with no money and no connections might as well be invisible. Or worse, a target. "I'll figure something out," she said, though she had no idea how. The clerk retreated inside, closing the door behind him. The warmth from the small building vanished in an instant. Clara sank onto the wooden bench, her carpet bag pressed against her chest like armor. The wind cut through her wool coat, finding every gap, every worn seam. 3 years ago, she had been Clara Weston of Boston, wife of Lieutenant James Weston, who died at Gettysburg with a bullet in his chest and her name on his lips. She had mourned him, buried him, then watched as his debts consumed everything: the house, the furniture, even her wedding ring. The mail-order advertisement had seemed like Providence. Seeking educated woman of good character for marriage and partnership in Wyoming Territory. Widower, respectful, promises safety and honest living. She had answered. Henry had written back. Months of letters, careful and kind. He never promised love, only respect. That had been enough. Now he was dead, and she was alone in a town that didn't want her. "Ma'am." Clara lifted her head. A girl stood at the edge of the platform, red hair tangled by the wind, cheeks raw from cold. Her coat was patched in 3 places, buttons mismatched. Behind her, a small boy clutched a scraggly brown dog that looked as thin as he did. "Ma'am, are you the lady from the train?" the girl asked. Clara wiped her eyes quickly. "Yes, but I don't think—" "You're crying." "I'm fine." "No, you ain't." The girl stepped closer. Her eyes were sharp, too old for her small face. "Nobody sits on that bench in this cold unless something's real wrong." Clara almost laughed. Almost. "You're very observant. Mama used to say that, before she died." The words hit Clara square in the chest. "I'm sorry. It was last spring. Birthing fever. The baby died too." The girl said it plainly, like reciting a fact from a school book. But her jaw was tight, her small hands clenched at her sides. The boy inched forward, still holding the dog. He didn't speak. just stared at Clara with enormous brown eyes. "What are your names?" Clara asked softly. "I'm Maggie Callahan. This here's my brother Eli. And that's Biscuit." She nodded toward the dog. "He ain't much, but he's warm." "Nice to meet you, Maggie." "Eli, Biscuit." Clara managed a small smile. "I'm Clara. You're the mail-order bride, ain't you?" Maggie asked. "The one Mr. Marsh sent for?" Clara's smile faded. "How did you know?" "Everybody knows everything in Sweetwater. News travels faster than the wind." Maggie tilted her head. "But Mr. Marsh is dead." "I know. So you ain't got nobody now?" "I suppose not." Maggie was quiet for a moment. Then she looked at Eli, some unspoken conversation passing between them. The boy nodded once, clutching Biscuit tighter. "You could come with us," Maggie said. Clara blinked. "What?" "Our pa Samuel Callahan. He's got a farm past the ridge. It ain't big, but it's warm, and he needs help. Ever since Mama died, he don't cook right, don't sleep right, don't do nothing right except work himself half to death." "Maggie, I can't just—" "Why not?" The girl crossed her arms. "You ain't got nowhere to go. We ain't got a mama. Seems like God's doing some matching if you ask me." Clara stared at her. The logic was so simple, so brutally practical, that it left her speechless. "I don't know your father. He didn't send for me." "No, but Mama did." Clara's breath caught. "What?" Maggie reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper worn soft at the creases. "She wrote this before she died. Said if anything happened to her, Pa would need someone. She was going to put an advertisement in the paper like Mr. Marsh did, but she got sick before she could send it." She held the paper out to Clara. Clara took it with trembling fingers. The handwriting was delicate, slanted, clearly a woman's hand. "Seeking a woman of kind heart and steady hand for my husband Samuel and our children Maggie and Eli. He is a good man, though he don't show it easy. He will need help if I am gone. He will need someone to remind him how to live." The letter wasn't finished. It broke off mid-sentence, the pen strokes trailing away like a life interrupted. Clara pressed her hand to her mouth. "Mama knew," Maggie said quietly. "She knew she might not make it, and she wanted us taken care of." Eli spoke for the first time, his voice barely above a whisper. "Please don't leave us alone, ma'am. We've been waiting." The walk to the Callahan farm took nearly an hour. The wind had died down some, but the cold was relentless, seeping through Clara's boots until she could barely feel her toes. Maggie led the way, sure-footed on the frozen path, pointing out landmarks as they went. "That's the old Miller place, empty now since they moved to California. That creek freezes solid by January. Eli fell in last year, and Pa like to had a heart attack. That there's the property line. Everything past the fence is ours." The farm appeared through a stand of bare cottonwoods, a low house with a stone chimney trailing smoke, a weathered barn, a chicken coop leaning slightly to one side. It wasn't much, but there was smoke, there was warmth, and right now that was everything. "Pa's probably in the barn," Maggie said. "He's always in the barn. Come on." She pushed open the front door without knocking. Clara hesitated on the threshold. "It's all right," Maggie said. "You're with us." The inside of the house was dim but warm. A fire crackled in the hearth, and the smell of coffee hung in the air. Burnt coffee, Clara noticed the kind that had sat too long on the stove. The room was clean but sparse. A table with 4 chairs, one of them pushed aside like it was never used. A shelf of books dusty. A woman's shawl still hung on a peg by the door, faded blue with small yellow flowers. Eli went straight to the fire, settling on the floor with Biscuit. Maggie started toward the back door. "I'll fetch Pa. You stay here. Get warm." "Maggie, wait." But the girl was already gone. Clara stood in the middle of the room, heart pounding. What was she doing here? This wasn't her home. That man Samuel Callahan hadn't asked for her, Hadn't even known she existed until his daughter decided to collect her like a stray. She should leave, find another way, anything but this. But Eli looked up at her from the floor, Biscuit's head in his lap, and said, "Are you going to stay, ma'am?" "I don't know," Clara admitted. "I hope you do. It's been real quiet since Mama went." The back door opened. Samuel Callahan stepped inside, Maggie behind him. He stopped when he saw Clara. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. He was tall, taller than she expected, with broad shoulders and hands roughened by years of work. His hair was dark, shot through with early gray at the temples. A scar ran along his jaw, pale against weather-beaten skin. But it was his eyes that held her, gray, guarded, filled with a weariness that ran deeper than exhaustion. "Who are you?" His voice was low, not unkind, but cautious. "Clara Weston. I was supposed to marry Henry Marsh." She forced herself to hold his gaze. "He's dead." "I know. Your daughter found me at the station. She brought me here." Samuel looked at Maggie. The girl lifted her chin, defiant. "She didn't have nowhere else to go, Pa. And you saw Mama's letter. You know what she wanted." A muscle tightened in Samuel's jaw. "That letter wasn't finished. Your Mama never sent it." "But she meant it. You know she did." Father and daughter stared at each other. A battle of wills Clara could feel even from across the room. Finally, Samuel turned back to Clara. "Mrs. Weston. Miss, my husband died in the war." Something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, maybe. The shared language of loss. "Miss Weston," he corrected. "I ain't looking for a wife. I ain't looking for anything. Maggie shouldn't have brought you here without asking." "I understand." Clara reached for her carpet bag. "I'll go." "No." Eli's voice was sharp, startling everyone. He scrambled to his feet, Biscuit tumbling from his lap. "No, Pa, you can't send her away. You can't." "Eli, she's nice. She talks soft like Mama did. And she's alone just like us. If you send her away, she'll freeze out there, and then she'll be dead too, and it'll be our fault." The boy's voice cracked. Tears spilled down his cheeks. Clara felt something break inside her chest. Samuel knelt in front of his son. His voice when he spoke was rough. "Eli, listen to me. I don't want nobody else to die, Pa. Nobody's gonna die. You don't know that. You said Mama wasn't gonna die either, but she did." Silence, heavy as stone. Samuel closed his eyes. When he opened them, he looked up at Clara. "One night," he said. "You can stay one night. Storm's coming anyway. No sense sending you back out there. But tomorrow, we figure something else out." Clara nodded. "Thank you." He stood slowly, like a man carrying more than his own weight. "Maggie, show her to the spare room. Eli, help me with the stock." "But Pa..." "Now, Eli." The boy wiped his face and followed his father out, Biscuit trotting behind them. Maggie watched them go, then turned to Clara with a small, knowing smile. "Don't worry," she said. "He says one night, but he ain't never turned away nobody who needed help. Mama used to say his bark was worse than his bite. He doesn't seem happy I'm here. Pa ain't been happy about nothin' since Mama died." Maggie picked up Clara's carpet bag and headed toward a narrow hallway. "But that don't mean he don't feel things. He just hides it is all." Clara followed her to a small room at the back of the house. It was plain, a bed with a worn quilt, a washstand, a single window looking out toward the barn. "This was the sewing room," Maggie said. "Mama spent a lot of time here. Sometimes I still come in just to, I don't know, remember, I guess." She set the bag on the bed and stood there, suddenly looking less like a fierce little soldier and more like what she was, a child who had lost her mother. "I miss her," Maggie said quietly. "Every single day." Clara's throat tightened. "I know. I miss my husband too, even after all these years. Does it ever stop hurting?" Clara thought about James, his laugh, his letters, the way he used to hold her hand when they walked through Boston Common. "No," she said honestly. But it changes. The sharp edges soften. You learn to carry it instead of being crushed by it. Maggie considered this. That's what Mama said. Before she went, she told me to carry the love, not the hurt. I ain't very good at it yet. Neither am I. Something shifted in the girl's expression. A recognition, maybe. An understanding that this stranger knew something about grief. I'm glad you're here, Miss Clara. Even if Pa ain't. She slipped out, closing the door softly behind her. Clara sat on the edge of the bed, still in her coat, still holding the unfinished letter from a dead woman she had never met. He is a good man, though he don't show it easy. She thought of Samuel Callahan's guarded eyes, the way he had knelt before his crying son, the gentleness buried beneath all that distance. One night he had said, but something told her something deep and quiet that one night might change everything. Supper was silent. Samuel had shot a rabbit that morning, and Maggie had made a stew, though she apologized twice for the burnt carrots. Clara offered to help, but the girl waved her away. You're a guest. Guests don't cook. I'm not much of a guest if I'm eating your food and sitting by your fire. Then tomorrow you can cook. Tonight you sit. Clara sat. Samuel ate quickly, his eyes fixed on his plate. Eli pushed his food around, sneaking bits of meat to biscuit under the table. Maggie tried to fill the silence with chatter stories about the neighbor's mean rooster gossip about the storekeeper's wife. Samuel said nothing. When the meal was done, Clara gathered the dishes before anyone could stop her. At least let me clean up. Samuel finally looked at her. You don't have to. I want to. She carried the plates to the basin. It's the least I can do. He watched her for a moment, something unreadable in his expression. Then he nodded once and retreated to the corner of the room where a carving knife and a block of wood waited. Clara washed the dishes in silence, listening to the scrape of his blade against wood, the crackle of the fire, Eli's soft murmurs to biscuit. Maggie sat at the table practicing letters on a piece of brown paper. It should have felt awkward, foreign. Instead, it felt strangely like peace. Later, when the children had gone to bed, Clara sat by the fire wrapped in a blanket Maggie had pressed into her hands. Samuel remained at his workbench, shaping the wood with methodical precision. What are you making? Clara asked. He paused. Horse. For Eli. Christmas is coming. It's beautiful work. He didn't respond, just kept carving. The silence stretched. Clara knew she should retire to her room, give him space, but something kept her rooted to the chair. Your daughter showed me her mother's letter, she said finally. Samuel's knife stilled. I know it wasn't finished. I know your wife never sent it. But the words she wrote. Clara's voice softened. She loved you very much, all of you. I know. His voice was hoarse. I'm not trying to take her place. I couldn't even if I wanted to. I just... She stopped. What was she trying to say? She didn't even know. It's been 7 months, Samuel said, still not looking at her. 7 months, and I still reach for her in the night, still hear her voice in the kitchen, still expect to see her hanging laundry in the yard. Clara's chest ached. That never fully goes away, but it becomes bearable, eventually. Samuel finally looked up. His gray eyes met hers, raw with grief he couldn't hide. Did you love him? Your husband. More than anything. Then you know why I can't. He stopped, shook his head. I ain't ready. I don't know if I'll ever be ready. I'm not asking you to be ready for anything, Clara said gently. I'm just asking for one night's shelter. That's all. He held her gaze a long moment. Then he nodded. One night, he repeated. But this time it sounded less like a boundary and more like a question. Clara rose from her chair. Good night, Mr. Callahan. Samuel, he said quietly. My name's Samuel. Good night, Samuel. She walked to her room, heart beating in a rhythm she hadn't felt in years. One night. But as she lay in the dark, listening to the wind howl outside and the soft footsteps of a man who couldn't sleep, she wondered if one night might already be the beginning of something neither of them had expected. She woke to screaming. Clara bolted upright, heart pounding. The scream came again, high terrified, coming from down the hall. Eli. She threw off the blanket and ran. Maggie was already in the doorway of the children's room, face pale. He's having nightmares again. He gets them sometimes. Clara pushed past her and knelt beside Eli's bed. The boy was tangled in his sheets, thrashing, tears streaming down his face. No, 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 Mama, don't go. Mama, please. Eli. Clara took his hands, held them firmly. Eli, wake up. You're safe. You're home. His eyes flew open, wild with fear. For a moment, he didn't seem to know where he was. It's all right, Clara murmured. I'm here. You're safe. Miss Clara. Yes, I'm here. He threw his arms around her neck and sobbed into her shoulder, great heaving sobs that shook his whole body. Clara held him tight, rocking gently, murmuring the same words her own mother had used when she was small. You're safe. I've got you. Nothing's going to hurt you. Maggie stood frozen in the doorway. Behind her, Samuel appeared chest-heaving like he'd run from the barn. He stopped when he saw Clara on the bed, his son clinging to her. Something in his expression cracked. Just for a second. Then the walls went back up. But Clara had seen it. That flash of desperate hope. That longing for someone, anyone, to help carry the weight. Eli's sobs slowly quieted. His grip loosened. His breathing steadied. Stay, he whispered, barely audible. Please stay, Miss Clara. Don't go like Mama did. Clara smoothed his hair back from his forehead. I'm not going anywhere tonight. I promise. She looked up at Samuel. He stood motionless, watching her comfort his son, a war playing out behind those guarded gray eyes. One night, she said softly. Not a demand, but an acknowledgement. A recognition that this choice wasn't hers alone. Samuel's jaw tightened. He turned and walked away. But he didn't say no, and in this house of grief and silence, that was something close to permission. Clara stayed with Eli until he fell back asleep, Biscuit curled at his feet, Maggie in the other bed, watching with eyes too knowing for a child her age. You're good at that, Maggie whispered. The comforting. I've had practice. Did you comfort your husband when he had nightmares? Clara's heart clenched. He had them every night after he came back from the front, even before he went back, and... She couldn't finish. I'm sorry. So am I. Maggie was quiet for a moment. Then, Miss Clara, I know Pa said one night, but I don't think he means it. I think he's just scared. Of what? Of caring about someone again. Of losing them. Clara looked at the sleeping boy, at the small hand still clutching her sleeve, even in dreams. Maybe we're all scared of that, she said. Maybe. But Mama always said the only thing scarier than loving someone is never loving anyone at all. Morning came gray and cold. Clara woke to the smell of burnt coffee again, and something else. Bacon, eggs, bread toasting over the fire. She dressed quickly and stepped into the main room. Samuel stood at the stove, spatula in hand, looking deeply uncomfortable. I thought, he said without turning around, since you cooked nothing last night you'd be hungry. Clara suppressed a smile. Thank you, he grunted. Maggie and Eli appeared, rubbing sleep from their eyes. They stopped short when they saw their father cooking. Pa, Maggie said slowly, you're making breakfast. Don't make a thing of it. But you never... I said don't make a thing of it. Eli climbed into his chair, watching his father with wide eyes. Then he looked at Clara and smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him. They ate in a silence that felt different from the night before. Less tense, more expectant. When the meal was done, Samuel set down his fork and looked at Clara. Storm's worse than I thought. Roads are impassable. You can't leave today even if you wanted to. Clara nodded. I understand. Might be a day or two before they clear. All right. He hesitated. Then, you could help with the children, if you want. Maggie's been teaching Eli his letters, but she ain't exactly patient. Hey, Maggie protested. It's true and you know it. Clara looked at the children. Maggie's indignant face, Eli's hopeful eyes. I'd be happy to help, she said. Samuel nodded once. Then he stood, grabbed his coat, and headed for the door. Pa, Eli called. Where are you going? Barn. Stock needs tending. In this storm. Stock don't care about storms. He paused at the door, his back to them. Miss West and Clara, there's more wood by the back door if the fire dies down, and the stew in the pot is from yesterday, just needs heating. Then he was gone, the door closing behind him. Maggie leaned close to Clara. He called you Clara. I noticed. He don't call nobody by their first name, not even Reverend Thomas. Clara felt something warm bloom in her chest. Maybe it slipped out. Pa don't slip, Maggie grinned. He likes you, he just don't know it yet. Clara shook her head, but she couldn't help the small smile that tugged at her lips. One night had become one day. One day might become two. And somewhere beneath all the grief and caution, something new was taking root. Something neither of them had expected. Something that felt dangerously close to hope. 2 days turned into 3. 3 turned into 5. The storm refused to break. Wind howled through the valley like something alive, piling snow against the barn doors and rattling the windows until Clara thought they might shatter. But inside the Callahan house, something else was happening. Something quieter. Something that scared her more than any blizzard. Miss Clara, watch this. Eli held up his slate, grinning. The letters were crooked, smudged with chalk dust, but they were legible. E-L-I. That's your name? Clara said, genuinely pleased. You wrote your name. Maggie couldn't teach me that. She just got mad and called me slow. I did not, Maggie protested from across the table. I called you distracted. There's a difference. Is not. Is to. Children, Clara said, but she was smiling. Both of you did well today. Eli, you're not slow, you just needed a different approach. And Maggie, you're an excellent reader, but teaching requires patience. I got patience? Maggie grumbled. You got the patience of a rattlesnake, Eli shot back. Clara laughed a real laugh, the kind she hadn't felt in years. Both children stared at her. What? She asked. Nothing, Maggie said quickly. It's just, that's a nice sound, laughing. This house ain't had much of that lately. The back door opened. Samuel stomped in snow, clinging to his shoulders, his face red from cold. He stopped when he saw the 3 of them at the table, the scattered slates, the chalk dust on Eli's nose. What's going on here? Miss Clara taught me to write my name. Eli held up the slate triumphantly. Look, Pa, E-L-I. Samuel's expression softened just for a moment. That's good work, son. She's better than Maggie. Hey, she don't yell when I make mistakes. Samuel's eyes met Clara's across the room. Something passed between them. Gratitude, maybe. Or something deeper. Thank you, he said quietly. It's nothing. I used to teach back in Boston. It ain't nothing. He hung his coat by the door. Eli's been struggling since his mama passed. Wouldn't even pick up a pencil most days. Clara looked at the boy, still admiring his slate. He just needed someone to believe he could do it. Samuel was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded and headed toward the stove, pouring himself coffee. Maggie leaned close to Clara. Pa's warming up to you, she whispered. I can tell. Maggie. I know, one day at a time, but I got eyes, Miss Clara, and what I see is a man who's been dead inside for 7 months, finally starting to breathe again. Clara didn't respond, but her heart beat a little faster. The sixth day, the storm finally broke. Clara woke to silence, true silence, without the constant howl of wind. She dressed quickly and stepped outside. The world had transformed. Snow blanketed everything in pristine white, glittering under a pale winter sun. The air was sharp clean, so cold it hurt to breathe. Beautiful and terrifying. Because silence meant the roads would clear, and clear roads meant she had no excuse to stay. "Pretty, ain't it?" She turned. Samuel stood on the porch behind her, steam rising from the cup in his hands. "Yes," she admitted. "I've never seen snow like this. Boston gets snow. Not like this, not endless." He moved to stand beside her close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "Wyoming winters ain't for the faint of heart. Some folks can't take it. They come out here full of dreams and leave broken by February. Are you trying to scare me off?" "Just telling you the truth." He sipped his coffee. "You deserve to know what you'd be signing up for." Clara's breath caught. What I'd be signing up for? Samuel didn't look at her. His jaw was tight, his eyes fixed on the distant ridge. "Road'll be clear by tomorrow," he said. "Reverend Thomas comes through every week after a big storm. He could take you back to town, help you figure out your next step." Clara's heart sank. "I see. Unless—" He stopped, started again. "Unless you wanted to stay a bit longer. Help with the children. Just until spring, maybe." "Samuel, it wouldn't be proper, I know that. But I could pay you. Not much, but something. And the spare room's yours anyway." He finally looked at her, and what she saw in his eyes made her chest ache. "The kids took to you. Eli especially. I ain't seen him smile like that since before his mama got sick." "What about you?" Clara asked softly. "What about me? Do you want me to stay?" The question hung between them, heavy as the snow weighing down the cottonwood branches. Samuel's hand tightened around his cup. "What I want," he said slowly, "don't matter much these days. It matters to me." He turned to face her fully. This close, she could see the exhaustion etched into every line of his face, the grief that never quite left his eyes. "I ain't a good bet, Clara. I'm broken in ways that might not ever heal. I can't promise you anything, not love, not forever, not even tomorrow. All I got is a falling down farm, 2 kids who need more than I know how to give, and a heart that's been buried in the ground next to my wife. That's honest. It's all I got left." Clara reached out and touched his arm. He flinched, but didn't pull away. "I'm broken too," she said. "I lost my husband, my home, my future. I came out here with nothing but a letter from a dead man and a prayer that something would work out." She smiled sadly. "Maybe 2 broken people together can make something whole." Samuel stared at her. His throat worked, but no words came. "I'll stay," Clara said. "Until spring. We'll see what happens after that." He nodded once sharply, like a man afraid to trust his voice. Then he walked back inside, and Clara stood alone on the porch, watching the sun climb higher over the snow-covered ridge. She had no idea what she'd just agreed to, but for the first time since stepping off that train, she felt something other than fear. She felt hope. The first Sunday after the storm, Reverend Thomas arrived. Clara heard the wagon before she saw it, the jingle of harness bells, the creak of wheels through snow. She was in the kitchen, helping Maggie knead bread dough when Eli came running in. "Someone's coming. Pa says to stay inside." Maggie wiped her hands on her apron. "Relax, Eli. It's just Reverend Thomas. He comes every week." "How do you know?" "Because Pa ain't reached for his rifle." Clara followed the children to the window. A sturdy wagon pulled by 2 draft horses had stopped in the yard. A man climbed down, elderly, white-bearded, wrapped in a heavy black coat. Samuel emerged from the barn to meet him. The 2 men shook hands, exchanged words Clara couldn't hear. Then the Reverend looked toward the house, spotted the faces in the window, and smiled. Come on, Maggie said. Reverend Thomas always brings peppermints. They met the men on the porch. The Reverend's eyes were kind, crinkled at the corners, full of the gentle warmth of a man who had spent his life shepherding souls through hard country. So this is the mysterious Miss Weston, he said, extending his hand. Samuel told me about you. I'm Thomas Whitmore. Clara Weston, it's nice to meet you, Reverend. The pleasure is mine. He studied her for a moment. Samuel says you've been helping with the children's education. I'm a teacher. Or I was back in Boston. A teacher. His smile widened. Well, now that's Providence if I ever saw it. Sweetwater's been without a proper school teacher for 2 years. The last one married a minor and moved to California. Clara blinked. I didn't know that. Most folks don't. The children go to a makeshift school in town 3 days a week when weather permits, but the woman running it is 72 and half blind. He glanced at Samuel. Seems to me a trained teacher might be exactly what this community needs. Samuel's expression was unreadable. That'd be Clara's choice. Of course, of course. The Reverend turned back to Clara. No pressure, Miss Weston. But if you're looking for a way to earn your keep and do some good, the schoolhouse could use someone like you. Clara felt something stir in her chest. Purpose. A reason to stay that went beyond charity. I'll think about it, she said. That's all I ask. He reached into his coat pocket and produced a small paper bag. Now, I believe some young people were promised peppermints. Eli cheered. Even Maggie smiled. Later, after the Reverend had gone, Clara found Samuel in the barn mending a broken harness by lamplight. You told him about me, she said. Samuel didn't look up. Told him the truth, that you were stranded, that you're helping with the kids. He thinks I should teach at the schoolhouse. Like I said, your choice. Clara stepped closer. What do you think? He finally raised his eyes. I think you'd be good at it. The children in town need someone who gives a damn. Most of the folks around here are too busy surviving to worry about education. But nothing. He returned to his work. You want to teach, teach. You want to stay here, stay. I ain't gonna tell you what to do. Samuel. She waited until he looked at her again. I'm asking for your opinion, not your permission. Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or appreciation. My opinion, he said slowly, is that this territory needs people who care about more than just cattle and gold. It needs people who believe in building something that lasts. Schools, churches, families. He paused. If you're that kind of person, then stay. If you're not, then go. Either way, you gotta decide for yourself. Clara nodded. I'll let the Reverend know tomorrow. Know what? That I'll take the teaching position, if it's offered. Samuel's hands stilled on the harness. For a long moment he was silent. Then he nodded once. Good. Good? Yeah. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Good. Clara turned to leave, her heart lighter than it had been in months. Clara. She stopped at the barn door. The kids are going to be happy, Samuel said. They've been worried you'd leave. Just the kids. He didn't answer. But the way he looked at her, steady, searching, almost vulnerable, told her everything she needed to know. She was still smiling when she went to bed that night. The following week, Clara made her first trip into Sweetwater. Reverend Thomas drove her in his wagon, the children bundled in the back with Biscuit between them. Samuel had stayed behind to tend the stock, but he'd stood on the porch watching them go until the wagon disappeared over the ridge. Sweetwater was a small town, one main street, a handful of buildings, a church with a crooked steeple. The general store sat at the center of everything, its windows clouded with frost. That's where Mrs. Garrett holds court, Reverend Thomas said, nodding toward the store. Eleanor Garrett owns half the businesses in town, knows everybody's secrets. She's got a sharp tongue, but she's fair, mostly. Should I be worried? Just be yourself. Folks around here can smell pretense a mile away. The schoolhouse was at the far end of the street, a squat building with a patched roof and a weather vane shaped like a rooster. Inside it was cold and dusty, the benches scarred with years of carved initials. But Clara saw potential. She saw children learning to read, to write, to dream beyond the boundaries of this harsh country. "It needs work," Reverend Thomas admitted. "Everything worth having needs work," Clara replied. He smiled. "You'll do fine, Miss Weston. You'll do just fine." They stopped at the general store to pick up supplies. Clara stepped inside while the children stayed with the wagon and immediately felt the weight of watching eyes. A woman stood behind the counter, tall, thin, with steel gray hair pulled back in a severe bun. Her eyes swept over Clara with surgical precision. "You're the mail-order bride," the woman said. Not a question. "I'm Clara Weston. I was meant to marry Henry Marsh, but he passed before I arrived." "I know. I know everything that happens in this town." The woman, Eleanor Garrett. Clara assumed, leaned forward. "What I don't know is why you're still here." "I'm staying with the Callahan family, helping with the children." "Staying." Eleanor's lips pressed into a thin line. "Living under a man's roof without the protection of marriage. That's what you call it." Clara felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I'm there as a governess, nothing more." "Is that what you're calling it?" "Because from where I stand it looks like a woman who couldn't find one husband has moved on to hunting another." The words hit like a slap. Clara's hands clenched at her sides. "I'm not hunting anyone," she said, keeping her voice steady. "I'm a teacher. Reverend Thomas has asked me to take over the schoolhouse. I'll be educating your children and grandchildren if you have any." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "Is that so?" "It is. And Samuel Callahan. What's he think about all this?" "Mr. Callahan thinks the children of Sweetwater deserve a real education. Perhaps you agree. Perhaps you don't. Either way, I'll be in that schoolhouse Monday morning." For a long moment, neither woman moved. Then Eleanor's lips twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. "You've got spine," she said. "I'll give you that. Most women who come out here looking for husbands fold at the first sign of trouble. I'm not most women." "No." Eleanor studied her with something approaching respect. "I don't suppose you are." She began gathering supplies, flour, sugar, salt, placing them on the counter. "The schoolhouse needs firewood," Eleanor said, not looking up. "I'll have my boy deliver some tomorrow." Clara blinked. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. You haven't survived a Wyoming winter. Talk to me in March." Clara paid for the supplies and turned to leave. At the door she paused. "Mrs. Garrett, what? Why did you give in so easily? I expected more of a fight." Eleanor's expression softened, just slightly. "Because I've buried 2 husbands and raised 6 children in this godforsaken territory. I know strength when I see it. And that family Samuel, those kids, they've been drowning since Mary died. If you can help them swim, I won't be the one to pull you under." Clara nodded. "I appreciate that." "Don't appreciate it. Prove it." Clara stepped out into the cold, her heart pounding. One battle won, but she had a feeling there would be many more. The first day of school came faster than Clara expected. She arrived early, building a fire in the pot-bellied stove, arranging the benches, wiping dust from the slate board. Maggie and Eli helped, their excitement infectious. "How many students will there be?" Eli asked. "Reverend Thomas said about 15. Maybe more if the weather holds." 15? Maggie's eyes went wide. "That's practically an army." "An army," Clara corrected gently. "And you'll be helping me manage them." By 9 o'clock, children began arriving, some on foot, some in wagons, all bundled against the cold. They ranged in age from 5 to 14, their faces a mix of curiosity and suspicion. Clara greeted each one at the door, learned their names, noticed the worn clothes, the chapped hands, the wary eyes. These children knew hardship. They'd been raised on it. But they were here. That meant something. The morning went smoothly. Clara started with basic reading, then moved to arithmetic. The younger children struggled, but the older ones helped, and by lunchtime, something resembling order had emerged. Then, Marcus Crane walked in. He was 12, big for his age, with his father's arrogant jaw and cold eyes. Victor Crane's son, the man Reverend Thomas had warned her about. The man who owned half the valley and wanted the other half. Marcus didn't knock. He just pushed through the door and stood there surveying the room like a king inspecting his subjects. "So you're the mail-order bride everyone's talking about," he said. Clara kept her voice calm. "I'm Miss Weston, your teacher, and you're late." "I ain't late. I just got here." "The class started at 9 o'clock. It's now past noon. That makes you late." Marcus snorted. "My pa says you're living with that Callahan trash out past the ridge. Says you ain't fit to teach nobody nothing." The room went silent. Every child's eyes swiveled between Clara and Marcus. Clara set down her chalk. "Your father is entitled to his opinion, but in this schoolhouse I'm in charge. You'll address me respectfully or not at all." "Or what?" Marcus stepped closer. "You gonna make me?" "You ain't even married. You ain't got no standing. My pa says you'll be gone before spring." Eli stood up from his bench, small fists clenched. "Don't you talk to Miss Clara like that." "Eli," Clara said quietly, "sit down." "But he—" "Sit down." Eli sat, but his face was red with anger. Clara walked toward Marcus, stopping just out of arm's reach. She was taller than him, not by much but enough. "Your father," she said softly, "may have money and land. He may have power in this town. But he doesn't have this classroom. I do. And if you want to learn to read, to write, to do anything more with your life than bully people weaker than you, then you'll sit down, open your primer, and show me you're capable of being more than your father's shadow." Marcus's face flushed. For a moment, Clara thought he might swing at her. Then, slowly, he turned and dropped onto an empty bench. "Fine," he muttered. "But don't expect me to like it." "I don't expect you to like it. I expect you to learn." She returned to the front of the room, heart pounding, but face serene. The other children were staring at her with something that looked almost like awe. "Now," Clara said, picking up her chalk. "Where were we? Yes, multiplication tables." After school, Maggie walked beside Clara on the way back to the wagon. "That was incredible," Maggie breathed. "Nobody ever talks to Marcus Crane like that. Nobody." "He's a bully. Bullies fold when you don't give them what they want." "But his pa, Victor Crane, he's dangerous. He's been trying to buy our farm for years. Pa says he don't take no for an answer." Clara's jaw tightened. "Then we'll have to keep saying no until he does." That night she told Samuel what had happened. He listened in silence, his face growing darker with every word. "Victor Crane," he said finally. "He's been circling this property like a vulture since Mary died. Thinks a widow with kids can't hold on to land." "Widower," Clara corrected. "You're a widower." "Same thing to a man like Crane. Weakness is weakness." Samuel pushed back from the table. "His boy said all that in front of everyone." "He did." "And you put him in his place." "I tried." Samuel shook his head slowly. "You've got more guts than sense, Clara Weston." "Is that a compliment?" "It's a fact." He looked at her, something complicated moving behind his eyes. "Victor won't let this slide. You embarrassed his son, made him look weak. That's not something the Cranes forgive. Then they'll have to learn to." Samuel almost smiled. "Almost. You keep surprising me," he said quietly. "Is that good or bad?" "Ain't decided yet." But the way he looked at her, warm, appreciative, almost tender, suggested he already had. Clara went to bed that night with a strange mix of fear and determination burning in her chest. She had made an enemy today, a powerful one. But she had also made a stand. For herself. For the children. For this family that had taken her in when no one else would. Whatever Victor Crane threw at her next, she would be ready. The retaliation came 3 days later. Clara was walking back from the schoolhouse when she saw the smoke. Black thick, rising from the direction of the Callahan farm. Her heart stopped. She picked up her skirts and ran. By the time she reached the property, her lungs were burning and her legs shook. The barn was on fire. Flames licked at the dry wood, sending sparks spiraling into the gray sky. Samuel! She found him around back, hauling water from the pump face streaked with soot. The children! She gasped. Inside. Safe. He didn't stop pumping. Grab a bucket. We've got to save what we can. Clara grabbed a bucket and fell into rhythm beside him. Water. Run. Throw. Return. Over and over until her arms screamed and her hands blistered. Maggie appeared with blankets soaked in water beating at the flames on the lower walls. Even Eli helped carrying smaller buckets with Biscuit barking frantically at his heels. It took an hour. Maybe more. Clara lost track. When the last flame died to smoke and the barn stood charred broken but still standing, they collapsed against the fence, too exhausted to speak. Samuel's hands were black with soot, his shirt torn, a burn mark reddening his forearm. It was set, he said finally. His voice was flat, dead. Somebody soaked the hay with kerosene. I smelled it before I saw the flames. Clara's stomach turned. Victor Crane. Can't prove it, but yeah. He stared at the ruined barn. This is how he works. Push until you break. Make it look like an accident so there's no one to blame. We should tell the sheriff. Samuel laughed a bitter, hollow sound. Sheriff's been in Crane's pocket since the day he pinned on that badge. Ain't no help coming from that direction. Maggie sat down beside Clara, her face streaked with tears and soot. What are we gonna do, Pa? Samuel didn't answer. He just stared at the smoke still curling from the barn roof, his jaw tight, his eyes empty. Clara reached over and took his hand. He flinched. But he didn't pull away. We rebuild, Clara said quietly. That's what we do. We rebuild and we don't let them win. Samuel looked at her. For a long moment he didn't speak. Then his fingers tightened around hers. We, he repeated. You said we. I did. You ain't part of this family, Clara. Not really. You could walk away, go back east, find a life that ain't got Victor Crane burning down barns in the middle of the night. Clara met his gaze steadily. I could, but I won't. Why not? Because I'm tired of running. I ran from Boston when James died. Ran from everything I knew. I thought I could find something better out here, and instead I found a dead man and a telegram. She squeezed his hand. But then I found you, and Maggie, and Eli, and for the first time in 3 years I feel like I'm somewhere I'm supposed to be. Samuel's throat worked. His eyes glistened just for a moment before he blinked and looked away. You're either the bravest woman I've ever met, he said hoarsely, or the most foolish. Maybe both. Maybe. He didn't let go of her hand. Maybe both. They sat there in silence as the sun set behind the ridge, painting the snow in shades of orange and gold. The barn still smoked. The threat still loomed. But something had shifted between them. Something that couldn't be unshifted. Clara didn't know what tomorrow would bring. Didn't know if they could survive what Victor Crane had planned. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She wasn't leaving. Not now. Not ever. This was her home now. These were her people, and she would fight for them with everything she had. The morning after the fire, Clara woke to voices outside. She dressed quickly, her muscles screaming from the night before, and stepped onto the porch. What she saw made her breath catch. A dozen wagons lined the road. Men with tools, women with food baskets, children clutching blankets and supplies. Reverend Thomas stood at the front directing traffic like a general marshalling troops. "What is this?" Clara asked. Maggie appeared beside her, grinning, despite the dark circles under her eyes. "This is Sweetwater, the real Sweetwater, not the Victor Crane version." Samuel emerged from behind the ruined barn sawdust in his hair, looking as stunned as Clara felt. Reverend Thomas walked toward him, hand extended. "You didn't think we'd let you rebuild alone, did you?" Samuel's jaw worked. "I didn't ask for help." "You didn't have to. That's not how neighbors work." The Reverend clapped him on the shoulder. "Now stop being proud and start being grateful. We've got a barn to raise." By noon, the charred timbers had been cleared. By evening, the frame of a new barn was taking shape. Women kept coffee hot and bread fresh. Children ran messages between work crews. Even Eleanor Garrett appeared, commanding a group of men with the efficiency of a drill sergeant. Clara worked alongside everyone else, hauling wood, carrying water, doing whatever needed doing. Her hands blistered and her back ached, but she didn't stop. Neither did anyone else. As the sun began to set, Samuel found her sitting on an overturned bucket, flexing her raw fingers. "You should rest," he said. "So should you." He sat down beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "I don't know how to thank them. All these people." "You don't have to thank them. That's the point." Samuel was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Victor Crane's going to be furious when he sees this. He wanted to break us. Instead, he brought the whole town together." "Maybe that's what happens when you push too hard. People push back." "Maybe." Samuel looked at her, something warm flickering in his gray eyes. "You should know half these folks came because of you." "Me." "Word spread about what you did at the schoolhouse, standing up to Marcus, not backing down." He shook his head slowly. "People around here, they've been scared of the Cranes for years. Watching you refuse to be scared, it meant something." Clara didn't know what to say. She hadn't thought of herself as brave. She'd just been doing what needed to be done. "I'm not special," she said finally. "I'm just stubborn." Samuel almost smiled. "Same thing far as I can tell." They sat together as the last light faded, watching the new barn rise against the darkening sky. For the first time since arriving in Wyoming, Clara felt like she truly belonged. The feeling didn't last. 3 days later, Victor Crane rode onto the property. Clara was in the kitchen with Maggie teaching her to make proper biscuits when Eli burst through the door. "Riders coming. 4 of them, Pa says to stay inside." Clara wiped flour from her hands and moved to the window. 4 men on horseback had stopped at the edge of the yard. The man in front sat tall in the saddle, silver hair gleaming under a black hat, his face carved from stone. Victor Crane. Samuel walked out to meet them, his rifle cradled loosely in his arms. Not pointed at anyone, not threatening, just present. "Crane," Samuel said, "you're on my land." Just being neighborly. Crane's voice carried easily across the yard, smooth, dangerous. "Heard you had some trouble. Barn fire, was it?" "You'd know." "Careful, Callahan. Accusations like that could get a man in trouble. So could burning down another man's property." Crane smiled, a thin reptilian expression that made Clara's skin crawl. "I came to make you an offer. One last time. Sell me the farm. I'll give you fair market value enough to start over somewhere else. Take your kids, take that woman you've got living here and go." Samuel's grip tightened on the rifle. "Not interested." "You sure about that? Wyoming winters are hard. Accidents happen. Fires spread." Crane leaned forward in his saddle. "How long do you think you can protect everyone, Samuel? Your children, your lady friend. How many more nights can you stay awake watching for flames?" "Long as I need to." "Really?" Crane's eyes flicked toward the house, toward the window where Clara stood. "She's pretty, I'll give you that. But she's also a liability. A mail-order bride with no family, no connections. If something happened to her, who would even know, who would care?" Clara's blood ran cold. Samuel took a step forward, rifle rising slightly. You threaten her again, and I'll put a bullet between your eyes, right here, right now, and I'll take my chances with the sheriff. Crane didn't flinch. You won't. You've got too much to lose. Try me. The two men stared at each other. The air crackled with tension. Then Crane laughed a short, ugly sound and turned his horse. Think about my offer, Callahan. You've got until the end of the month. After that? He shrugged. Well, I can't be responsible for what happens to people who don't know when to quit. He rode away, his men following, leaving nothing but hoofprints in the snow and a threat hanging in the air. Samuel didn't move until they were out of sight. Then he lowered the rifle and walked back to the house, his face pale, his hands shaking. Clara met him at the door. He threatened you, Samuel said. His voice was rough. Directly, to your face. I heard. This isn't your fight, Clara. You could leave. Go back east. Be safe. We've had this conversation. We're having it again. He grabbed her shoulders, his grip almost painful. You don't understand what he's capable of, the things he's done. People have disappeared, Clara, whole families, and nobody does anything because they're too scared. Clara looked into his eyes, saw the fear there, the desperation. But she also saw something else. Something he probably didn't even know he was showing. Love. He loved her. Maybe he didn't know it yet. Maybe he wasn't ready to say it. But it was there, written in every line of his face, every tremble of his hands. And she loved him too. The realization hit her like a thunderbolt. Samuel, she said softly. I'm not leaving. Not because I'm brave. Not because I'm stubborn. Because this is my home now. You and Maggie and Eli, you're my family. And I don't abandon family. His grip loosened. His eyes searched her face. Clara, don't. She placed her hand over his heart. Don't tell me to go. Don't push me away. I know you're scared. I'm scared too. But we're stronger together. You know that. Samuel closed his eyes. When he opened them again, something had changed. The walls were still there, but cracks had formed. Light was getting through. I can't lose anyone else, he whispered. I can't. You won't. I promise. You can't promise that. I can. And I am. She rose on her toes and pressed a kiss to his cheek, soft, brief, but full of meaning. Now let's go inside and figure out how to stop Victor Crane. Together. Samuel stood frozen for a moment. Then slowly his hand came up to touch the place where her lips had been. Together, he repeated like a man testing the weight of a new word. Together. They walked inside side by side, and for the first time the word felt like more than just a promise. It felt like a vow. That night, after the children were asleep, Clara and Samuel sat at the table, a lamp flickering between them. We need leverage, Clara said. Something that makes Crane back off. The man owns half the territory. What kind of leverage could we possibly have? Clara drummed her fingers on the table, thinking. Reverend Thomas mentioned that Crane's been buying up land for years, pressuring people to sell. That's not news. Everyone knows. But has anyone documented it? Dates, names, methods. If we could prove a pattern of intimidation... Samuel shook his head. Most folks are too scared to talk, and the ones who aren't are already gone. What about the ones who left? Do you know where any of them went? Samuel paused. The Millers. They moved to California last year. Said they couldn't take another winter, but everyone knew Crane had been hounding them for months. Do you have an address? Might be in Mary's letters. She kept in touch with folks who left. His jaw tightened at the mention of his wife's name, but he pushed through. There's a box in the attic. Her correspondence. Could you check? He hesitated. I haven't gone through her things. Not since she passed. Clara reached across the table and covered his hand with hers. I'll go with you, if you want. Samuel stared at their joined hands. Something shifted in his expression, pain giving way to something softer. Yeah, he said quietly. I'd like that. The attic was cold and dark, smelling of dust and old wood. Samuel held the lamp while Clara sorted through boxes, their breath clouding in the frigid air. This one, Samuel said, finally pulling a wooden chest from beneath a pile of quilts. His hands trembled slightly as he opened the lid. Inside were letters, hundreds of them tied with ribbon and organized by year. Mary Callahan had been a prolific correspondent. Clara began sorting through them, setting aside anything addressed from out of state. Samuel watched silent, his face unreadable. Here, Clara said, holding up an envelope. The Millers, return address in Sacramento. That's them. She set it aside and kept searching. By the time they were done, she had a dozen letters from families who had left Sweetwater, all of them, according to Samuel, pressured by Victor Crane. This is a start, Clara said. If we can get them to write statements about what Crane did. You think they will? They left to get away from him. Why would they risk getting pulled back in? Because they might not be the only ones he's hurt. Because maybe they've been waiting for someone to stand up. Clara clutched the letters to her chest. People aren't as cowardly as we think, Samuel. Sometimes they just need to know they're not alone. Samuel looked at her in the lamplight, his gray eyes soft. You really believe that? I do. Even after everything coming out here, being abandoned, nearly freezing to death. Especially after that. Because I wasn't alone either. I had Maggie and Eli. I had you. She smiled. And look where I am now. Samuel's throat worked. He reached out slowly and brushed a strand of hair from her face. Mary would have liked you, he said. She always said I needed someone to shake me out of my stubbornness. Was she wrong? No. His hand lingered near her cheek. She was never wrong about anything. Clara leaned into his touch just slightly. Tell me about her. What? Tell me about Mary. Not the sad parts, the happy ones. Samuel was quiet for a long moment. Then slowly he began to talk. He told her about meeting Mary at a barn dance, how she'd laughed at his clumsy attempt to ask her to dance. About their wedding day when her father had threatened to shoot him if he ever made her cry. About Maggie's birth, how he'd fainted in the kitchen, and Mary had never let him forget it. He talked for nearly an hour, the words pouring out like water from a cracked dam. Clara listened, laughing when he laughed, aching when his voice broke. When he finally fell silent, tears were streaming down his face. I'm sorry, he said, wiping them away. I don't know why. Don't apologize. Clara took his hand. You needed to remember her. Not the sick Mary, not the dying Mary. The real Mary. The one who loved you. Samuel squeezed her hand so hard it hurt. She told me, he said hoarsely. Before she died, she told me not to be alone forever. Said the kids needed a mother, and I needed someone to make me smile again. And what did you say? I said I'd never love anyone like I loved her. Clara's heart twisted. That's true, you know. You won't. Every love is different. I know that now. He lifted his eyes to hers. I didn't understand then. I thought she was telling me to replace her. But she wasn't. She was telling me to live. And are you living? Samuel looked at her. Really looked like he was seeing her for the first time. I'm starting to, he said. Because of you. Clara felt tears prick her own eyes. Samuel, I ain't good with words, never have been, but you should know. He stopped, started again. You should know that whatever happens with Crane, whatever comes next, I'm grateful. For you. For everything you've done for my kids, for this family. I haven't done anything special. You stayed. His voice cracked. Everyone leaves Clara, everyone. But you stayed. She cupped his face in her hands, forcing him to meet her eyes. I'm not going anywhere, she said. Not now. Not ever. You're stuck with me, Samuel Callahan." For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Samuel leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle, tentative, a question more than a statement. Clara answered by pulling him closer, her fingers threading through his hair, her heart pounding against her ribs. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. "I shouldn't have," Samuel began. "Don't you dare apologize." "But, Samuel." Clara pressed a finger to his lips. "Shut up and kiss me again." He did. The second kiss was longer, deeper, full of everything they'd been too afraid to say. Clara felt herself falling into him, into this life, into a future she hadn't dared to imagine. When they finally pulled apart, Samuel rested his forehead against hers. "We should get some sleep," he murmured. "Probably." Neither of them moved. "Clara." "Yes?" "I think I'm falling in love with you." Clara's heart soared. "Only think." "Fine, I know." He pulled back to look at her, a rare smile touching his lips. "I know I'm falling in love with you." "Happy." "Very." She kissed him once more, quick, sweet, full of promise, then stood and gathered the letters. "Tomorrow we start fighting back," she said. Samuel rose beside her, taking her hand. "Tomorrow we start fighting back," he agreed. They walked down from the attic together, fingers intertwined, hearts beating in tandem. The war with Victor Crane was just beginning, but for the first time, Clara believed they could win. 3 weeks later, the letters started arriving. The Millers wrote first a long, detailed account of how Crane had poisoned their well and blamed it on natural causes. Then the Hendersons, describing how their cattle had mysteriously died after they refused Crane's first offer. The Petersons, the Walshes, the Brannigans. Story after story, family after family, all the same pattern: pressure, threats, accidents, departure. Clara organized everything into a thick folder, cross-referencing dates and methods. Samuel rode to the territorial capital and returned with the name of a federal marshal who had a reputation for going after land grabbers. "Marshal James Dunbar," Samuel said, setting a telegraph on the table. "He's agreed to come. Should be here by month's end." "That's 2 weeks away." "I know. We just have to hold on until then." But holding on proved harder than expected. The day after Samuel's return, Marcus Crane didn't show up for school. Neither did 3 other children whose fathers worked for Victor. Clara tried to continue as normal, but the empty benches gnawed at her. She'd been making progress with Marcus, slowly, painfully, but progress nonetheless. He'd started doing his homework, started raising his hand, started looking at her with something other than contempt. Now he was gone. "It ain't your fault," Maggie said as they walked home. "His pa probably told him to stop coming." "I know, but I can't help feeling like I failed him." "You didn't fail nobody. Some people can't be saved from their own families." Clara looked at the girl, barely 9 years old, speaking with wisdom beyond her years. "When did you get so smart?" Clara asked. Maggie shrugged. "Mama always said I was born knowing too much. Said it was going to be a blessing and a curse." She was right, Maggie grinned. Usually was. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She lay in her bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind howl outside. Every creak of the house made her jump. Every shadow seemed to move. Victor Crane's deadline was approaching, the end of the month, and she had no idea what he would do when it passed. A soft knock at her door made her sit up. "Clara." Samuel's voice barely above a whisper. "You awake?" "Yes." The door opened. Samuel stood there in the lamplight, his hair mussed, his shirt untucked. "Couldn't sleep either?" Clara asked. "No." He hesitated in the doorway. "I keep thinking about what Crane said. About not being able to protect everyone. He's trying to scare you. It's working." Clara patted the edge of the bed. "Come here." Samuel crossed the room and sat beside her. This close, she could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the worry etched into every line of his face. "Talk to me," she said. "I keep having nightmares. About the fire. About the children." He swallowed hard. "About you." "What happens in the nightmares?" "You die. All of you. And I can't do anything to stop it." Clara took his hand. "Samuel, look at me." He raised his eyes. "I'm not going to die. The children are not going to die. We have a plan. We have the marshal coming. We have evidence. Evidence doesn't stop bullets. No, but it puts the man firing them in prison." She squeezed his hand. 2 weeks, Samuel. We just have to survive 2 weeks. And if we don't, we will." "How can you be so sure?" Clara leaned forward and kissed him softly. "Because I refuse to die before I get to marry you." Samuel's eyes widened. "What?" "You heard me." "Clara, I haven't even asked." "I know. I'm asking you." She cupped his face in her hands. "Samuel Callahan, when this is over, when Victor Crane is in prison and our family is safe, will you marry me?" Samuel stared at her. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. "You're proposing to me?" "Yes." "Women don't propose to men." "This one does." Clara smiled. "So, what do you say?" For a long moment, Samuel didn't answer. His expression was unreadable, his gray eyes searching her face like he was looking for something. Then slowly a smile spread across his face, the first real smile she'd ever seen him wear. "Yes," he said. "God help me, yes." Clara laughed and threw her arms around him, burying her face in his shoulder. He held her tight, his heart pounding against hers. "You're crazy," he murmured into her hair. "Probably." "I love you anyway." "Good, because you're stuck with me now." Samuel pulled back to look at her, his eyes shining. "I can think of worse fates." "So can I." They stayed like that for a long time, holding each other in the darkness, drawing strength from each other's presence. 2 weeks, Clara thought. 2 weeks until Marshal Dunbar arrived. 2 weeks until they could bring down Victor Crane. They just had to survive. And together she believed they could. The morning everything changed started like any other. Clara was teaching multiplication to the younger children, while Maggie helped the older ones with their reading. Eli sat in the front row, tongue poking out in concentration as he practiced his letters. The door slammed open. Marcus Crane stood in the doorway, chest heaving, face pale as death. "Miss Weston," he gasped. "You gotta come. Now." Clara rose from her desk. "Marcus, what's wrong?" "My pa," the boy's voice cracked. "He's gonna kill Mr. Callahan. They're at the ridge right now. Pa's got men with guns." The world tilted. "Maggie," Clara said, her voice steady, despite the terror clawing at her chest. "Take the children to Reverend Thomas. Now." "But Miss Clara." "Now, Maggie." The girl nodded, her face white, and began herding the children toward the door. Clara grabbed her coat and turned to Marcus. "Show me." "Miss, you can't." "Show me, now." They ran. Clara's lungs burned and her legs screamed, but she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Samuel was out there somewhere, facing Victor Crane alone. The ridge came into view, a rocky outcropping overlooking the valley. Clara could see figures gathered there. Horses, men with rifles, and in the center, Samuel standing alone. "Pa!" Marcus shouted, running ahead. "Pa! Stop!" Victor Crane turned, his face twisted with rage when he saw his son. "What are you doing here, boy? You can't do this." Marcus stumbled to a halt between his father and Samuel. "You can't just kill people. Get out of the way." "No!" Crane's hand moved faster than Clara could track. The slap sent Marcus sprawling into the snow. "I said get out of the way!" Clara reached the ridge, breathless, heart pounding. "Victor Crane!" she called out. Every head turned toward her. Crane's eyes narrowed. "Well, well, the mail order bride. Come to watch your man die. I've come to give you a choice." Clara walked forward, forcing herself to stay calm, to keep her voice steady. "Turn around and ride away, or face the consequences." Crane laughed. "Consequences, woman, I own this territory. There are no consequences for me." "Is that so?" Clara reached into her coat and pulled out a stack of papers. "Then I suppose you won't mind explaining these to Marshal James Dunbar when he arrives next week." Crane's smile faltered. "What are those sworn statements? From the Millers, the Hendersons, the Petersons, a dozen families you terrorized into leaving." Clara held them up. Every threat, every poisoned well, every mysterious fire, all documented, all notarized, all on their way to the federal marshal's office in Denver. Silence fell over the ridge. Crane's face had gone gray. "You're bluffing. Try me. Those papers don't mean anything. It's their word against mine. Their word, and mine, and Samuel's, and everyone in Sweetwater who's been too afraid to speak up until now." Clara stepped closer. "It's over, Crane. You've lost. The only question is whether you walk away today or get dragged away in chains next week." Crane's hand moved toward his gun. "Pa, don't." Marcus scrambled to his feet, throwing himself in front of Clara. "Don't hurt her! Please!" Crane froze. His eyes moved from his son to Clara to Samuel and back again. "You're protecting her." His voice was incredulous. "You're protecting the woman who humiliated you." "She didn't humiliate me. She taught me." Marcus's voice shook, but he didn't move. "She's the only teacher who ever thought I was worth something. The only adult who ever treated me like I could be more than just your son." Crane stared at his boy like he'd never seen him before. The moment stretched taut as a wire. Then, slowly, Crane's hand fell away from his gun. "This isn't over," he said quietly. "Yes, it is." Clara's voice was steel. "The marshal will be here in days. You have that long to decide whether you want to be here when he arrives. I suggest you use that time wisely." Crane looked at her with pure hatred. But behind the hatred was something else. Fear. He turned to his men. "We're leaving." "But boss?" "I said we're leaving." He mounted his horse without another word and rode away, his men following. Marcus stayed behind. Samuel crossed the distance between them and pulled Clara into his arms. "You're insane," he breathed into her hair. "Absolutely insane. It worked. You could have been killed. So could you." Samuel pulled back to look at her. His eyes were bright with tears he was too proud to shed. "I love you," he said. "Have I mentioned that? Once or twice?" "Well, I'm mentioning it again." He kissed her forehead. "I love you, Clara Weston. And when this is truly over, I'm going to marry you so fast your head will spin." Clara laughed through her own tears. "Promise?" "Promise." Marcus stood a few feet away watching them with an expression Clara couldn't read. "Marcus," she said gently, stepping out of Samuel's embrace. "Are you all right?" The boy shook his head. "I don't know what to do. My pa. Everything I thought I knew." Clara knelt in front of him. "You made a choice today. A brave choice. That's who you are, Marcus. Not your father's son. Your own man. But where do I go? What do I do?" Clara looked at Samuel. He nodded slowly. "You come with us," Clara said. "For now, at least. Until we figure out something better." Marcus's eyes widened. "You'd do that after everything. Everyone deserves a second chance." Clara stood and offered him her hand. "What do you say?" The boy hesitated. Then slowly he took her hand. "Thank you." he whispered. Clara squeezed his fingers. Come on, let's go home. The three of them walked down from the ridge together, leaving the battleground behind. The war wasn't over. Not completely. But Clara knew with absolute certainty that they had won the most important battle, and the rest would follow. Marcus Crane sat at their kitchen table, looking like a ghost of the boy who had terrorized her classroom just weeks ago. Clara set a bowl of stew in front of him. He stared at it, but didn't eat. It ain't poisoned, Maggie said from across the table. Miss Clara's cooking is actually pretty good. Maggie, Clara warned. What, I'm being nice. Marcus picked up the spoon, took a small bite, then another. Color slowly returned to his cheeks. Thank you, he said quietly, for taking me in, after everything my pa did. Samuel leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. You ain't your father, boy. What you did on that ridge took guts. Pa's gonna be furious when he finds out where I am. Let us worry about your pa. Eli crept closer to Marcus Biscuit at his heels. Are you scared? Marcus looked at the younger boy. Yeah, I am. That's okay. I get scared too. Miss Clara says being scared don't make you weak. Running away from what scares you does. Marcus's eyes flickered to Clara. Something shifted in his expression, the hard shell cracking just a little more. She said that. She says lots of smart things. Eli climbed onto the bench beside Marcus. She's gonna be our new mama. Pa asked her to marry him. Eli, Maggie hissed. That was supposed to be a secret. It ain't a secret no more. I heard them talking. Clara felt heat rise to her cheeks. Samuel coughed and looked away. Marcus glanced between them. You're getting married. We are, Clara said, when things settle down. Things might not ever settle down, not while my pa's around. Then we'll get married anyway. We're done waiting for Victor Crane's permission to live our lives. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. I think I like you, Miss Weston. You're nothing like my ma was. What was your mother like? The smile faded. Scared. All the time. Pa made sure of that. He pushed the empty bowl away. She died when I was 6. Pa said it was a fever, but I heard the servants talking. They said she jumped off the cliff behind our house. Clara's heart clenched. Marcus? It's okay. I mean, it ain't okay, but I've had a long time to think about it. He looked at Samuel. Your wife, the kid's mama. She was happy, wasn't she? Samuel's jaw tightened. Yeah, she was. I could tell. This house feels different from mine. Warmer. Marcus stood abruptly. Where do you want me to sleep? I can take the barn if there ain't room inside. You'll take the spare room, Clara said firmly. The one I've been using. But where will you? I'll figure something out. Samuel cleared his throat. She'll stay in my room, in Mary's old bed. Everyone turned to look at him. What? Maggie's eyes went wide. Pa, that's practical. We're engaged, and I ain't letting her sleep in the barn. Samuel's ears had gone red. It ain't like we'll just be sleeping, nothing improper. Clara bit her lip to keep from laughing. Samuel, you don't have to explain. I know. He rubbed the back of his neck. I just wanted everyone to know it's all proper. Pa's face is the color of a tomato, Eli observed. Shut up, Eli. But it is. The tension in the room broke. Even Marcus cracked a small smile. Clara crossed to Samuel and took his hand. Thank you. For offering. Ain't nothing. But he squeezed her fingers and didn't let go. That night, Clara lay in the narrow bed that had once belonged to Mary Callahan, listening to Samuel's breathing from across the room. You awake? She whispered. Yeah. What are you thinking about? A long pause. Mary. How she'd feel about all this. Clara's chest tightened. And what do you think she'd say? I think she'd say, "It's about damn time I stopped mourning and started living." Samuel shifted in the darkness. She wasn't the jealous type. She always said love wasn't a pie giving some to one person. Didn't mean there was less for everyone else. She sounds wise. She was. Wiser than me, that's for sure. Clara stared at the ceiling. Can I ask you something? Anything. Do you think she'd have liked me? Samuel was quiet for so long that Clara thought he might have fallen asleep. Then, I think she'd have loved you. You're everything she always wanted for this family, someone strong, someone kind, someone who fights for the people she cares about. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. I wish I could have met her. Me too. Samuel's voice was rough. But in a way I think you have. She's in Maggie's stubbornness, in Eli's kindness, in every good thing about this place. And in you. Maybe. The best parts anyway. Clara wiped her eyes. Samuel. Yeah. I love you. The words hung in the darkness, simple and true. I love you too, Clara. More than I thought I could love anyone again. She fell asleep with those words warming her heart more precious than any fire. 3 days later, Marshal James Dunbar arrived. He came alone riding a gray mare with a federal badge glinting on his chest. He was younger than Clara expected, early 40s, with sharp eyes and a quiet authority that commanded respect without demanding it. Samuel met him at the gate. Clara watched from the porch, her heart in her throat. Mr. Callahan? The marshal dismounted and extended his hand. James Dunbar, I got your telegram. Thank you for coming, Marshal. Thank me when we've got Crane in custody. Dunbar's eyes swept the property, taking in the new barn, the house, the faces watching from windows and doorways. I've been tracking that man for 3 years. Every time I get close, witnesses disappear or change their stories. Not this time, Clara said, stepping forward. We have documented statements from a dozen families, all willing to testify. Dunbar turned to her with interest. You must be Miss Weston, the teacher. That's right. I hear you stood up to Crane on the ridge, bluffed him into backing down. It wasn't a bluff. The evidence is real. I know. I've seen copies. The marshal smiled, a rare expression that transformed his stern face. You've got courage, Miss Weston. Most men I know wouldn't have done what you did. Most men you know haven't had to fight for their family. Dunbar nodded slowly. Fair point. He turned back to Samuel. Where's the Crane boy? I understand he's been staying with you. Inside. He's scared, but he's willing to talk. Good. His testimony could be the nail in his father's coffin. They went inside. Marcus sat at the table, pale but composed. When he saw the federal badge, his hands started shaking. Easy, son, Dunbar said, pulling out a chair. I'm not here to arrest you. I just need to ask some questions. About my pa. About everything. What you've seen, what you've heard, what you know. Marcus looked at Clara. She nodded encouragingly. Okay, the boy said quietly. I'll tell you everything. For the next 2 hours, Marcus talked. He talked about the fires his father had ordered, the cattle poisoned to force families off their land. The men who had disappeared after refusing Crane's offers, never seen again, their families told they had moved on. He talked about his mother, about finding her body at the base of the cliff when he was 6 years old, about his father's cold command to never speak of it again. He talked about the fear that had ruled their household, the servants who walked on eggshells, the violence that erupted without warning. Clara held Maggie and Eli close, shielding them from the worst of it, but the older girl's face had gone white. When Marcus finally finished, Dunbar sat back with a heavy sigh. That's enough to put him away for life. Maybe hang him. Hang him. Marcus's voice cracked. He's still my pa. He's a murderer, son. Multiple times over. Dunbar's voice was not unkind. I know this is hard, but the man you've described isn't a father. He's a monster wearing a father's face. Marcus stared at the table. Tears dripped silently down his cheeks. Clara crossed the room and knelt beside him. You did the right thing. I know it doesn't feel like it now, but you did. He's gonna hate me forever. Maybe. But the people he hurt, their families, they'll remember you as the one who finally stopped him. She took his hand. That's worth something, Marcus. That's worth everything. The boy broke, then sobbing into her shoulder, like the child he'd never been allowed to be. Clara held him, rocking gently, murmuring words of comfort. Across the room, Samuel watched with something like awe in his eyes. Dunbar stood and moved to the door. I'm going to ride into town, send some telegraphs. I'll need deputies to make the arrest. Crane's got men, it won't be easy. When? Samuel asked. Tomorrow morning. At dawn, if I can arrange it. The marshal paused at the threshold. Keep the boy safe, and keep your family inside tonight. No telling what Crane might try once he realizes what's happening. We'll be ready. Dunbar nodded and was gone. That night, no one slept. Samuel sat by the window with his rifle watching the road. Clara kept the children occupied with quiet games, trying to distract them from the tension that filled the house like smoke. Marcus sat alone in the corner staring at nothing. Around midnight, Maggie crept over to him. You want some cocoa? Miss Clara made some. Marcus looked up surprised. Why are you being nice to me? Because you look sad. And because you helped us. Maggie sat down beside him. My mama used to say that people who do bad things can still become good people. They just have to choose. Your mama sounds like she was smart. She was the smartest person I ever knew. Until Miss Clara came. Marcus almost smiled. Miss Weston's pretty smart, I guess. She's gonna be our new mama. For real this time. Maggie tilted her head. Does that make you jealous? That we get a mama and you don't? The question hung in the air, raw and honest, in the way only a child's question could be. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Maybe a little, but mostly I'm just glad somebody gets to be happy. Maggie considered this. Then, without warning, she threw her arms around him. You can share her, she whispered. If you want. Miss Clara's got enough love for everyone. Marcus froze. Clara watched from across the room, her heart aching. Slowly, carefully, Marcus hugged Maggie back. Thanks, he said hoarsely. That means a lot. Clara wiped her eyes and turned away to give them privacy. Some wounds took years to heal. But tonight, in this small house surrounded by darkness and danger, she saw the first fragile signs of healing. It was enough. For now, it was enough. Dawn came gray and cold. Marshal Dunbar rode up just as the first light touched the ridge, accompanied by 4 deputies on horseback. They looked grim, determined, ready for a fight. It's time, Dunbar said. Crane's at his ranch. My men will surround the property while I make the arrest. Samuel reached for his coat. I'm coming with you. Samuel, no. Clara grabbed his arm. I have to. This man threatened my family, burned my barn, tried to destroy everything I've built. Samuel's jaw was set. I need to see it end. Then I'm coming too. Clara, don't argue with me. She pulled on her coat. We started this together. We finish it together. Dunbar looked between them, then shrugged. Your funeral. But stay back when the shooting starts. There's going to be shooting. Eli's voice piped up from the doorway. Clara knelt in front of him. We're just going to talk to some people, sweetheart. Maggie's in charge until we get back. But what if the bad men... Reverend Thomas is on his way. He'll stay with you until we return. She kissed his forehead. Everything's going to be fine, I promise. Eli looked unconvinced, but nodded. Marcus stood behind him, his face pale. Miss Weston, tell me when it's over. Whatever happens, I need to know. I will, I promise. They rode out as the sun climbed higher, a small army heading toward the final battle. The Crane Ranch sprawled across the valley like a wound on the land, massive opulent built on the bones of everyone Victor had destroyed. Dunbar held up his hand, signaling the group to stop. "Something's wrong," he said quietly. Clara felt it too. The ranch was too quiet. No movement in the windows. No horses in the corral. No smoke from the chimneys. "Spread out." Dunbar ordered his deputies. "Check the outbuildings. Callahan, you and Miss Weston stay with me." They approached the main house slowly, weapons drawn. The front door hung open, swinging in the wind. Dunbar went in first. Clara followed, her heart pounding. The house was empty. Not just empty, abandoned. Drawers pulled out. Papers scattered. The safe in Crane's study hanging open and hollow. "He ran," Samuel said, his voice flat with disbelief. "The bastard ran." Dunbar crouched by the fireplace, sifting through ashes. He burned documents, probably anything incriminating. He pulled a half-charred paper from the grate. "Train schedule. Denver. He's heading for the capital. Or farther. Man like Crane's got money stashed everywhere. He could disappear for years." Clara felt something cold settle in her stomach. "So it's over. He just gets away." "Not if I can help it." Dunbar straightened. "I'll wire every station between here and the coast. Put his description on every telegraph line in the territory. He can't hide forever." But Clara knew better. Men like Victor Crane always found ways to hide. Always found shadows to disappear into. "Marshal!" One of the deputies appeared in the doorway. "You need to see this, in the barn." They followed him to the large structure behind the house. The smell hit Clara first, blood and something else, something darker. A body lay in the hay. One of Crane's men shot through the chest. "He killed his own people," Dunbar said grimly. "Anyone who might talk." Samuel turned away, his face gray. "This is my fault. I should have pushed harder, moved faster." "No!" Clara grabbed his arm. "This is Crane's fault. His choice. His evil. But if he gets away, then we rebuild. We protect our family. We live the life he tried to destroy." She forced him to meet her eyes. "We don't let him win by destroying ourselves with guilt." Samuel stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. "You're right. You're always right. Remember that when we're married." Despite everything, he almost smiled. They searched the ranch for another hour, but found nothing useful. Crane had been thorough. Whatever secrets the place had held were now ashes on the wind. By afternoon, they were heading home. Clara rode beside Samuel, exhaustion weighing on her shoulders. Victory should have felt sweeter. Instead, it felt hollow. "We won," Samuel said quietly. "Didn't we? We survived. Our family is safe. The people he hurt can finally speak without fear." Clara sighed. "That's a kind of winning." "But he's still out there. For now, maybe forever. We can't control that." She reached over and took his hand. "We can only control what we do next." "And what's that?" Clara thought about it. Thought about the children waiting at home. The schoolhouse that needed her. The man beside her who had become her whole world. "We get married," she said. "We raise our family. We build something beautiful on the ashes of everything he tried to burn." Samuel's fingers tightened around hers. That simple, and that hard. She smiled at him. "But we do it together." "Together?" he repeated. "I like the sound of that." They rode home as the sun began to set, painting the snow in shades of gold and rose. Clara didn't know what tomorrow would bring. Didn't know if Crane would return, if the shadow of his threat would ever fully lift. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She was home. She was loved. She had a family worth fighting for. And no matter what came next, that would be enough. 3 days after Crane's escape, something unexpected happened. Clara was teaching when the door opened, and Eleanor Garrett walked in. The older woman stood in the doorway, her sharp eyes sweeping over the classroom, taking in the children at their benches, the neat rows of slates, the carefully written lessons on the board. "Mrs. Garrett," Clara said, surprised. "Can I help you?" "You can. After class?" Eleanor's voice was clipped. "I'll wait outside." She turned and left, leaving Clara to wonder what fresh disaster was brewing. When the children were dismissed, Clara found Eleanor on the schoolhouse steps, wrapped in her heavy coat against the cold. "Walk with me," Eleanor said. They walked in silence for several minutes, past the church, past the general store, toward a small rise overlooking the valley. Finally, Eleanor spoke. "Victor Crane is gone. You know that." "I know. What you might not know is that he left behind more than just his ranch." Eleanor's jaw tightened. "He left debts, lots of them, owed money to half the businesses in this territory, including mine." Clara's stomach sank. "I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry. Be smart." Eleanor turned to face her. "Crane's property is being seized by the territory. Everything he owned, the ranch, the land, the cattle, it's all going up for auction next month." "I don't understand what that has to do with me." "It has to do with you because I'm buying it, all of it, and I'm going to need people to help me run it." Eleanor's eyes bore into hers. "People I trust. People who've proven they can't be intimidated." Clara stared at her. "You want me to work for you?" "I want you to partner with me. You and Samuel Callahan." Eleanor pulled a folded paper from her coat. "This is a proposal. Equal shares. The Crane Ranch becomes a cooperative, multiple families working together, sharing profits, building something sustainable." "Why would you do this?" "Because I'm 62 years old, and I've watched too many good people get destroyed by men like Victor Crane. Because this territory needs to change, and that starts with how we treat each other." Eleanor's voice softened just slightly. "And because you impressed me, Clara Weston. You stood up when everyone else bowed down. That's rare." Clara took the paper with trembling hands. "I need to discuss this with Samuel." "Of course. Take your time." Eleanor started to walk away, then paused. "One more thing. The town council met last night. We've decided to rename the schoolhouse." "Rename it? The Clara Weston School for Young Minds." Eleanor's lips twitched. "Has a nice ring to it, don't you think?" Before Clara could respond, the older woman was gone. Clara stood alone on the rise, the paper clutched to her chest, tears streaming down her face. She had come to this territory expecting nothing, hoping for nothing, planning for nothing but survival. And now this. She ran home faster than she'd ever run before. Samuel was in the new barn mending harnesses when she burst through the door. "Clara, what's wrong?" She thrust the paper into his hands, too breathless to speak. He read it once, twice, 3 times. Then he looked up, his face stunned. "Is this real?" "Eleanor Garrett brought it herself. She wants us to be partners." "Partners? In the Crane Ranch?" "In everything. Equal shares. A cooperative." Samuel sank onto a hay bale, the paper dangling from his fingers. "I don't understand. Why would she?" "Because we fought back. Because we didn't give up." Clara knelt in front of him. "Samuel, do you understand what this means? Our children, they'll have a future, a real future, not just survival, but prosperity. It's too much. We can't accept this." "Why not?" "Because we ain't earned it. We nearly died for this land." Clara grabbed his hands. "We stood against a monster and didn't back down. We've earned every single acre." Samuel stared at her. Slowly, something shifted in his expression. "You really think we can do this?" "I know we can. It's a lot of responsibility. We'll share it. With Eleanor. With the other families." Clara smiled. "That's the whole point. No one person carrying everything alone." Samuel was quiet for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed. What? I'm just thinking about what Mary would say. He shook his head. She always told me I dreamed too small, said I was so busy surviving I forgot to live. And now I'm starting to think maybe she was right. He pulled Clara close, pressing his forehead to hers. Maybe it's time to dream a little bigger. Is that a yes? That's a yes. He kissed her softly. Let's do it. Let's build something worth leaving behind. Clara laughed through her tears and kissed him back. Outside, the sun was setting on the Wyoming Valley. On the ruins of everything Victor Crane had tried to destroy. On the hope growing in its place. A new beginning. A new family. A new future. All of it built on the ashes of hatred rising like a phoenix into the light. That night they gathered everyone around the kitchen table, Maggie, Eli, Marcus, even Biscuit, and told them the news. Eli's eyes went wide. We're going to live in the big house. Not quite, Clara said. The ranch will belong to lots of families. We'll work it together. But we'll have more land, more animals, much more. Eli turned to Marcus. Does this mean you get to stay forever? Marcus looked at Clara, uncertainty in his eyes. I don't know. Do I? Clara reached across the table and took his hand. This is your home now, Marcus. For as long as you want it. The boy's face crumpled. He didn't cry. He was too proud for that, but his eyes shone with unshed tears. Thank you, he whispered. I don't deserve. Stop. Samuel's voice was firm, but kind. You turned against your own father to protect people he wanted to hurt. That took more courage than most men show in a lifetime. You've earned your place here. Marcus nodded, unable to speak. Maggie looked around the table, her expression thoughtful. So we're really gonna be a family. All of us. Even Marcus. All of us, Clara confirmed. Good. Maggie grinned. I always wanted more brothers to boss around. Hey, Eli protested. She's not wrong, Marcus said with a weak smile. She's been bossing me around since I got here. Someone had to. You were moping. I was not. The argument dissolved into laughter, and Clara felt something warm spread through her chest. This was it. This was what she'd been searching for all along. Not just a place to live, but a place to belong. Not just people to care for, but people who cared back. Family. She looked at Samuel across the table. He was watching the children with an expression she had never seen before, pure, uncomplicated joy. He caught her eye and smiled. Thank you, he mouthed. For what? She mouthed back. Everything. Clara blinked back tears and smiled. Everything. Yes, that was exactly what she had found. The wedding was set for Christmas Eve. Clara stood in the small room behind the church, hands trembling as Maggie helped fasten the buttons on her dress. It was simple white cotton with lace trim, but it was hers. Eleanor Garrett had insisted on buying the fabric as a gift. You're shaking, Maggie observed. I know. Are you scared? Clara considered the question. Not scared. Overwhelmed, maybe. I never thought I'd get married again. Did you love your first husband? Very much. Do you love Pa? Clara smiled. Very much. Maggie nodded, satisfied. Then there's nothing to be scared about. Love is love. Mama used to say it don't matter how many times you find it, just that you hold on to it when you do. Clara pulled the girl into a tight hug. Your mama was very wise. I know. Maggie's voice was muffled against Clara's shoulder. I miss her, but I'm glad you're here. I think she would be too. Eli burst through the door, his hair slicked back and his shirt tucked in for once. Miss Clara, I mean Mama, what do I call you now? Whatever feels right, sweetheart. Pa says they're ready. Reverend Thomas is waiting. Eli bounced on his heels. Marcus saved us seats in the front row. Biscuit tried to come inside, but Mrs. Garrett shooed him out. Clara laughed. Well, we can't keep everyone waiting. Are you ready? Eli grabbed her hand. Maggie took the other. Ready, they said together. They walked into the church, and Clara's breath caught. Every pew was full. The entire town of Sweetwater had turned out families she'd taught, neighbors who'd helped rebuild the barn, even people she barely knew. Eleanor Garrett sat in the front row, her stern face softened by something that might have been a smile. Marcus sat beside her, looking uncomfortable in a borrowed suit, but determined to be there. And at the altar, Samuel waited. He wore his best clothes cleaned and pressed his boots, polished his hair combed back. But it was his eyes that stopped Clara's heart. They shone with tears he wasn't trying to hide. Reverend Thomas beamed as Clara walked down the aisle, the children on either side of her. Dearly beloved, he began, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Samuel Callahan and Clara Weston. Two souls brought together by circumstance, bound together by choice, and strengthened by the love of family and community. Clara barely heard the words. She was too focused on Samuel's face, on the way he looked at her, like she was the most precious thing in the world. Samuel, Reverend Thomas said, do you take Clara to be your wife? To love and cherish in sickness and in health for as long as you both shall live? I do. Samuel's voice was steady. I do, and I'll spend every day proving I'm worthy of her. Clara, do you take Samuel to be your husband? To love and cherish in sickness and in health for as long as you both shall live? Clara felt tears spill down her cheeks. I do. With all my heart, I do. Then by the power vested in me by God in the territory of Wyoming, I pronounce you husband and wife. Reverend Thomas grinned. Samuel, you may kiss your bride. Samuel stepped forward, cupped Clara's face in his hands and kissed her. The church erupted in applause. Eli cheered. Maggie whooped. Even Eleanor Garrett dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. When they finally broke apart, Samuel pressed his forehead to Clara's. Hello, Mrs. Callahan, he whispered. Hello, husband. Ready for whatever comes next. Clara looked at their children, Maggie grinning, Eli bouncing, Marcus watching with cautious hope. She looked at the community that had embraced her, the future stretching out before them like an endless horizon. Ready, she said, for all of it. The celebration lasted until midnight. Tables had been set up in the church hall, laden with food brought by every family in town. There was music, fiddles, and guitars played by ranch hands who'd traded their work clothes for something almost respectable. Children ran between adults' legs, hopped up on sweets and excitement. Clara danced with Samuel until her feet ached, then danced with Eli, then Maggie, then even Marcus, who blushed the whole time, but didn't step on her toes once. You clean up nice, Clara told him. Mrs. Garrett made me wear this, said I couldn't attend a wedding looking like a stable boy. She was right. Marcus's lips twitched. Don't tell her that. She's insufferable enough already. As the night wore on, Clara found herself standing at the edge of the room, watching her new family laugh and celebrate. Samuel was deep in conversation with Reverend Thomas. Maggie had gathered a group of girls her age and was clearly holding court. Eli had fallen asleep in a corner, Biscuit curled up beside him. Happy? Clara turned. Eleanor Garrett stood beside her, a cup of cider in her weathered hand. Happier than I've ever been. Good, you deserve it. Eleanor sipped her cider. I've lived in this territory for 40 years, watched a lot of people come and go. Most of them couldn't handle the hard times. They'd give up, move on, let the land beat them. And the ones who stayed became the backbone of this place. The families who built it, who kept it running through drought and flood and every other disaster God threw at us. Eleanor looked at her with something like respect. You're one of those, Clara Callahan. You've got staying power. I hope so. I know so. Eleanor set down her cup. Now go dance with your husband. The night's not getting any younger, and neither am I. Clara laughed and returned to Samuel, who swept her into his arms without a word. They danced until the music stopped, until the last guests said their goodbyes, until the children were bundled into the wagon, and they started the long ride home under a sky full of stars. Home. The word had never meant more than it did tonight. The new year brought changes faster than Clara could track them. The Crane Ranch, now officially the Sweetwater Cooperative, opened its doors in January. 5 families moved onto the property, each assigned a section to work, profits shared equally at the end of each season. Eleanor Garrett managed the business side with ruthless efficiency, while Samuel oversaw the livestock operations. Clara continued teaching, but the schoolhouse had grown too small for the number of students. By February, they broke ground on a new building, larger, sturdier, with real glass windows and a proper stove. The Clara Weston School for Young Minds. Eli read from the sign being erected above the door. "That's your name, Mama?" "I know." Clara still got a flutter in her chest every time he called her that. "It's a big responsibility." "You'll be amazing. You're already amazing." She pulled him close and kissed the top of his head. "Thank you, sweetheart. That means everything." Marcus had enrolled as a full-time student, catching up on years of education that his father had deemed unnecessary. He struggled at first pride, making it hard to admit he didn't know things, but Clara was patient, and slowly, steadily, he began to flourish. "I want to go to university," he told her one afternoon. "Become a lawyer. Help people who can't help themselves. That's a wonderful goal. You think I can do it?" "I think you can do anything you set your mind to." Marcus ducked his head, embarrassed by the praise, but Clara saw the small smile he couldn't quite hide. Spring came early that year. The snow melted, revealing green shoots pushing through the dark earth. The cooperative's first calves were born healthy and strong. The new schoolhouse was finished, its fresh paint gleaming in the sunshine. And then, on a perfect April morning, everything changed. Clara was hanging laundry when she heard the horse approaching. She turned, shading her eyes against the sun, expecting to see Samuel returning from the far pasture. Instead, she saw a stranger. The man rode a black horse, his clothes dusty from travel, a badge gleaming on his chest. Marshal's badge. "Mrs. Callahan," he called. Clara's stomach dropped. "Yes. I'm Deputy Marshal Hawkins. I've been sent from Denver with news." "What news?" The deputy dismounted, removing his hat. "Victor Crane was apprehended 3 weeks ago in Kansas City. He's been extradited back to Wyoming to stand trial." Clara felt the ground shift beneath her feet. "He's here, in the territory. In custody in Cheyenne. The trial's set for next month." Hawkins pulled an envelope from his coat. "Marshal Dunbar requested I deliver this personally. You and your husband are being called as witnesses." Clara took the envelope with numb fingers. "Witnesses?" "Your testimony and the evidence you gathered will be crucial to securing a conviction." Hawkins put his hat back on. "I know this must be difficult, ma'am, but justice is finally within reach. Victor Crane will answer for his crimes." After the deputy left, Clara stood in the yard, the envelope clutched to her chest, her mind racing. Victor Crane, coming back to Wyoming, standing trial, facing her. She thought she'd made peace with his escape, thought she'd accepted that some monsters simply got away. Now the earth was shifting again, old fears clawing their way back to the surface. "Clara!" She turned. Samuel stood in the doorway, his face pale. He'd heard. "He's back," Clara said. "They caught him." "I know, the deputy told me on his way out." Samuel crossed the yard and took her hands. "Are you all right?" "I don't know. I thought I wanted this, justice, closure. But now that it's happening..." She shook her head. "What if seeing him again undoes everything? What if I freeze?" "You won't." "How do you know?" "Because I know you." Samuel cupped her face. "You're the bravest woman I've ever met. You faced him down on a frozen ridge with nothing but words and courage. You can face him again in a courtroom surrounded by people who love you. What if Marcus has to testify? What if they make him confront his own father? Then we'll be there with him, every step of the way. Samuel pulled her close. We do this together, Clara. Just like everything else. She pressed her face against his chest, breathing in his familiar scent, drawing strength from his steady heartbeat. Together, she whispered. Always. The journey to Cheyenne took 3 days. They traveled as a family. Clara, Samuel, Maggie, Eli, and Marcus. Eleanor Garrett accompanied them, insisting that someone needed to keep everyone organized. Marcus didn't speak for most of the trip. He sat in the wagon staring at his hands, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. Clara sat beside him as they made camp the second night. You don't have to do this, she said quietly. No one would blame you if you stayed behind. Yes, I do. Marcus's voice was flat. He's my father. What he did all those people he hurt, I was part of that world. I ate food bought with blood money. I lived in a house built on suffering. He finally looked at her. If I don't stand up now, if I don't look him in the eye and say what he is, then I'm no better than him. That's not true. It feels true. He swallowed hard. Miss Clara, Mrs. Callahan, I'm scared. More scared than I've ever been. I know. So am I. Really. Really. She took his hand. But we're not alone. We have each other. We have the truth. And we have something Victor Crane never had. What's that? People who love us. People who will catch us if we fall. Marcus stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. Okay, he said. Okay, I can do this. I know you can. The courthouse in Cheyenne was larger than anything Clara had ever seen. Stone walls, marble floors, a ceiling so high it seemed to touch heaven. Men in suits hurried through the corridors, their voices echoing in the cavernous space. Marshal Dunbar met them at the entrance. You ready? He asked. As will ever be, Samuel replied. Good. Crane's lawyers have been trying every trick in the book to get the case dismissed. They're arguing that the witnesses are unreliable, that the evidence was fabricated, that their client is a respected businessman being targeted by jealous competitors. Dunbar's jaw tightened. They're lying, and everyone knows it, but lies can sound convincing when spoken loudly enough. What do you need from us? The truth, simply told. Let the jury see who Victor Crane really is. Dunbar looked at Marcus. You especially. A son testifying against his father, that's powerful. But it's also going to be hard. I understand. Do you? Because once you're up there, Crane's lawyers are going to do everything they can to discredit you. They'll call you a liar, a traitor, a troubled child seeking attention. They'll try to make you angry, make you cry, make you say something that contradicts your written statement. Marcus paled, but held his ground. Let them try. Dunbar studied him for a moment, then nodded. All right, let's go get justice. The courtroom was packed. Clara sat in the gallery with Samuel, the children on either side of them. Eleanor had positioned herself near the back where she could observe everything without being observed. And there at the defendant's table sat Victor Crane. He looked diminished somehow, thinner, older, his silver hair lank and his face gaunt. But his eyes were the same. Cold, calculating, dangerous. Those eyes found Clara in the crowd and held her gaze. She didn't look away. I'm not afraid of you anymore, she thought. You have no power here. Something flickered in Crane's expression. Surprise, maybe, or recognition that the woman he'd threatened was not the same woman sitting before him now. The judge entered and the trial began. Witness after witness took the stand. The Millers, who had traveled all the way from California to describe how Crane had poisoned their well. The Hendersons, whose cattle had mysteriously died after refusing his offer. Reverend Thomas, who testified about families that had simply vanished after crossing Crane. Each story, built on the last, a damning portrait of corruption and cruelty. Crane's lawyers tried to discredit them all. Too emotional, too inconsistent, too eager for revenge. But the sheer volume of testimony was overwhelming. Too many people with too similar stories to be coincidence. Then Clara took the stand. "Mrs. Callahan," the prosecutor said, "can you describe your first encounter with Victor Crane?" Clara gripped the wooden rail and began to speak. She told them about the fire, the threats, the confrontation on the ridge. She told them about the evidence she'd gathered, the letters she'd written, the families she'd convinced to come forward. "And what did Mr. Crane say when you confronted him with this evidence?" "He said accidents happen, that Wyoming winters are hard and people disappear." Clara's voice was steady. "He said if something happened to me, no one would know or care." A murmur ran through the courtroom. "And how did that make you feel?" "Terrified, but also determined. Because I knew if I backed down, he would win, and the people he'd hurt would never get justice." Crane's lawyer stood for cross-examination. "Mrs. Callahan, isn't it true that you arrived in Wyoming territory as a mail-order bride, that the man you were supposed to marry had died, leaving you destitute?" "Yes. And you subsequently moved into the home of Samuel Callahan, a single man with young children, without the protection of marriage?" "Yes. Some might say you had every reason to want Victor Crane out of the way. His land, his wealth, with him gone, you stood to benefit enormously." Clara felt anger spark in her chest, but kept her voice calm. "I didn't want his land. I didn't want his wealth. I wanted my family safe. That's all." "But you did end up benefiting, didn't you? The cooperative, the new schoolhouse, the comfortable life you now enjoy." "Objection," the prosecutor interrupted. "Mrs. Callahan is not on trial here." "Sustained. Move on, counselor." The lawyer smirked, but returned to his seat. Clara stepped down from the stand, her legs trembling. Samuel caught her hand as she sat beside him. "You were incredible," he whispered. "I wanted to scream at him. But you didn't. That's what matters." Then Marcus was called. The boy walked to the stand like a man walking to his execution. His face was white, his hands clenched at his sides, but his eyes were clear. "Please state your name for the record." "Marcus Crane." "And your relationship to the defendant." "He's my father." The courtroom buzzed. Crane's lawyers shifted uncomfortably. Even the judge leaned forward with interest. "Marcus," the prosecutor said gently, "can you tell us what life was like growing up in your father's household?" Marcus took a deep breath. And then he spoke. He told them about the servants who disappeared after displeasing his father, about the meetings held late at night with men who carried guns and spoke in code, about finding his mother's body at the bottom of the cliff when he was 6 years old. "My father told me she fell," Marcus said, his voice cracking. "But I heard the servants whispering. They said she jumped. They said she couldn't take it anymore." Crane's face went purple. He started to rise, but his lawyers pulled him back down. "Did your father ever threaten you directly?" "Every day. If I didn't behave, didn't obey, didn't make him proud, he'd remind me what happened to people who disappointed him." Marcus's eyes found Clara in the gallery. "I thought that was normal. I thought everyone lived like that. Until I met Miss Clara, Mrs. Callahan. She showed me what real family looks like, what real love looks like." "And why are you testifying today?" "Because the truth matters. Because all those people he hurt deserve justice." Marcus straightened his shoulders. "And because I'm not my father's son anymore. I'm my own person, and I choose to be better." The courtroom was silent. Then slowly applause began. First one person, then another. Then the entire gallery was on their feet, clapping for the boy who had found the courage to stand against his own blood. The judge banged his gavel, calling for order, but there was no hiding the emotion in his own eyes. Victor Crane sat motionless, his face a mask of fury and something else: fear. The verdict came 3 days later: guilty, on all counts. Victor Crane was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As the marshals led him away, Crane turned and looked at Clara one last time. "This isn't over," he hissed. Clara met his gaze without flinching. "Yes, it is. The doors closed behind him, and Clara felt something release in her chest. It was over. Finally, truly over. Samuel wrapped his arms around her. The children pressed close. Eleanor Garrett dabbed at her eyes and pretended she wasn't crying. "We did it," Maggie whispered. "We did it together," Clara corrected. "All of us." Outside the courthouse, the sun was setting over Cheyenne, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. Clara stood on the steps surrounded by the people she loved and felt a peace she had never known before. No more running, no more fear, no more shadows, just life. Beautiful, imperfect, miraculous life. "Ready to go home?" Samuel asked. Clara looked at him, at his steady gray eyes, his weathered face, the love written in every line. "I've been home since the day I met you," she said. He kissed her softly, and the children groaned in theatrical disgust. "Can we go now?" Eli complained. "I miss Biscuit." "And my bed," Maggie added. "And Mrs. Garrett's cooking." Marcus said, then blushed when Eleanor shot him a surprised look. "I mean, it's not terrible." "High praise," Eleanor said dryly. "Come on, all of you. We've got a long journey and an early start tomorrow." They climbed into the wagon as the first stars appeared overhead. Clara leaned against Samuel's shoulder. Eli curled up in her lap. Maggie and Marcus bickering quietly in the back. Eleanor sat up front, reins in hand, somehow managing to look dignified despite the dust of the road. Home. The words sang through Clara's heart like a hymn. She had come to Wyoming territory with nothing, no family, no future, no hope. A mail-order bride abandoned at a lonely station, clutching a telegram that had destroyed her dreams. And she had found everything. Love, purpose, family, a community that had become her own. The road stretched out before them, winding through valleys and over ridges toward a future she could barely imagine. There would be challenges ahead, there always were. But they would face them together, as they had faced everything else. That was what family meant. That was what home meant. And Clara Callahan, teacher, mother, wife, survivor, finally understood that she had been searching for this place her whole life. Not a location, not a building, not even a territory. Home was the people who loved you. Home was choosing to stay even when staying was hard. Home was building something beautiful from the ashes of everything that had tried to destroy you. She had found it. Against all odds, against all expectations, against every force that had tried to break her. She had found home, and she would never let it go. The wagon rolled on through the starlit night, carrying them toward tomorrow. Toward the life they had fought for. Toward the love they had earned. Clara closed her eyes and smiled. This was her story now. Her choice. Her family. Her future. And it was only just beginning.